She didn't fall in love with a taken man on purpose. She fell in love with the way he listened, the way he understood her silence, and the way her heart forgot to ask who he already belonged to. She never expected love to find her there, in a place so ordinary and unremarkable. It began without drama, without intention, without even awareness. A simple exchange of words turned into comfort, and comfort quietly transformed into something deeper. There was no single moment she could point to and say, "This is when it happened." Love didn't arrive loudly, it slipped in unnoticed, settling gently into her days. At first, it felt harmless. Conversations flowed easily, laughter came naturally, and silence never felt awkward. He listened in a way that made her feel important, as if her thoughts mattered more than the noise of the world around them. He remembered the small things, how she liked her coffee, the stories she told only once, the emotions she tried to hide behind casual smiles. That attention felt rare, and rarity has a way of pulling the heart closer. She told herself it was nothing. Just friendship, just familiarity, just comfort, but hearts don't obey explanations. With every shared moment, she felt a quiet warmth growing, something steady and persistent. She noticed how her mood lifted when he was around, how his absence left an unspoken emptiness. She began waiting for his messages without admitting she was waiting. The connection deepened in subtle ways. A look held a second longer than necessary. A pause in conversation that said more than words ever could. They understood each other without effort, as if their thoughts moved along the same rhythm. With him, she didn't have to pretend or perform. She could simply exist, and that simplicity felt intoxicating. What made it unexpected was how safe it felt. Love usually announces itself with chaos, but this arrived with calm. There were no promises, no confessions, no dramatic declarations. Just two people slowly drifting closer, unaware that the distance between them had already disappeared. She trusted him without realizing she was placing her heart in his hands. Only later did awareness creep in. A sudden hesitation in her feelings. A quiet voice reminding her of reality. She began noticing the boundaries she had ignored, the truths she had set aside. But by then, the connection had already taken root. Love doesn't wait for permission, and it certainly doesn't retreat easily. She found herself caught between innocence and awareness. The purity of how it began clashed with the complexity of what it became. She hadn't chased love, yet it had chosen her. And once chosen, it wrapped itself around her heart, growing stronger with every shared smile, every unspoken understanding, every moment that felt too meaningful to be accidental. Their love did not live in grand gestures or public promises. It survived in moments that were never meant to last, moments borrowed from time itself. Every interaction felt precious because it was limited, fragile, and never guaranteed. They learned to treasure what others might overlook, because that was all they were allowed to have. Stolen moments became their language. A quiet conversation when no one was listening. A smile exchanged across a crowded room. A message read and reread, not because of the words, but because of the feeling behind them. Each moment carried the weight of everything they could not say out loud. Love, for them, was hidden in restraint. There was a strange beauty in that secrecy. Without the freedom to be open, they became experts in subtlety. A glance held meaning, a gentle tone revealed affection. Even silence became expressive, charged with emotion. They didn't need to touch to feel close. Proximity alone was enough to make her heart race, enough to remind her that this connection was real. Time behaved differently around them. Minutes stretched endlessly when they were together, while hours passed too quickly when they weren't. She learned how to memorize moments, storing them in her mind for later, replaying them in solitude. A laugh, a shared joke, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. These fragments became her refuge. Yet every stolen moment carried an ache. Joy was always followed by awareness. Happiness came wrapped in limitation. Just as she would begin to feel safe in the warmth of his presence, reality would pull her back. Every goodbye felt heavier than the last, because it was never complete. There was always more left unsaid. She became skilled at loving quietly. She learned how to smile when her heart was full and hide the longing when it overflowed. She learned how to be present without demanding more. Loving him meant accepting fragments instead of wholeness, and convincing herself that fragments were enough. These moments shaped her more than she admitted. They taught her patience, restraint, and the strange strength it takes to love without claim. She lived between anticipation and loss, always waiting for the next shared second, knowing it would never be enough, yet cherishing it as if it were everything. In the secrecy of those moments, love felt pure and painful at the same time. It existed without ownership, without certainty, without a future she could plan, and still her heart clung to every second they stole from a world that never truly belonged to them. Every time she saw him, her heart betrayed her with an intensity she could neither control nor deny. It wasn't just the way he smiled, warm and effortlessly charming, but the little details that made her soul flutter, how his eyes lit up when he laughed, how his hand would brush against hers in fleeting moments that felt eternal. She knew she shouldn't feel this way. She knew the line she crossed every time her thoughts wandered into forbidden territory. And yet, the more she tried to contain her emotions, the more they grew, blooming like a dangerous flower in the garden of her heart. She loved him not just for who he was, but for the comfort he unknowingly provided, a refuge from the quiet loneliness that had settled into her life. In the quiet corners of the cafe where they met by chance, she studied him from across the table, memorizing the curve of his jaw, the way his hair fell softly onto his forehead, the rhythm of his speech that seemed to dance in harmony with her own heartbeat. Every word he spoke was a melody she longed to keep playing in her mind, and every shared laugh felt like a secret the universe had whispered just for them. Yet beneath the surface, a storm of guilt raged, because she understood the life he had already promised to someone else, the sacred vows he carried silently in his heart. Loving him was a paradox, a pleasure that came with a bitter aftertaste. She found herself replaying moments over and over, the subtle glances, the accidental touches, the warmth of his presence lingering even after he had gone. Each encounter was both intoxicating and painful, like tasting honey only to discover it leaves an ache in its absence. Her friends noticed the quiet distraction in her eyes, the way she sometimes smiled at nothing, as if caught in a memory they couldn't see. And in the solitude of her own room, she allowed herself to dream, imagining a world where their love could exist freely, without restrictions or consequences, where the weight of reality wouldn't crush the fragile hope she nurtured. There were nights when she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every stolen moment, every whispered conversation they had shared. She could still feel the warmth of his hand brushing against hers, the fleeting contact that sent shivers down her spine, igniting emotions she had never known she could feel so fiercely. It was a love that existed in stolen glances, in hurried messages sent when no one was watching, a love that thrived in the shadows yet burned brighter than the sun. Each encounter left her breathless, each word from him etched into her memory like an indelible mark, impossible to erase or forget. She often wondered how it was possible to feel so deeply for someone whose life was entwined with another. The thought of him with someone else twisted her heart, yet she could not stop herself from loving him with a fervor that defied reason. She adored him in the small ways, noticing the way his eyes softened when he spoke about his passions, the subtle curve of his smile when he laughed, the gentle patience he showed to everyone around him. In those moments, she felt as though she could see the real him, the man behind the responsibilities, the man who had captured her heart without even trying. Every day was a delicate balance, a dance between desire and restraint. She cherished their conversations that meandered into the night, the comfortable silences that spoke louder than words, and the fleeting touches that left her longing for more. And yet, she was constantly aware of the boundaries she could not cross, the reality that their love existed in secret, hidden from the world. There was a sweetness in the forbidden, a thrill in knowing that her feelings were a precious secret she alone held, but it was accompanied by a persistent ache, a gnawing awareness that happiness in its purest form might never be hers. She found herself lost in daydreams, imagining a life where he was hers completely, where their hearts could meet without hesitation, without the weight of responsibility or societal expectations. She imagined the laughter they would share, the quiet evenings spent in each other's arms, the conversations that would stretch into the early hours of the morning. In those moments, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a love unbound, a love that defied circumstance. There were mornings when she would wake up with his name lingering on her lips, a silent prayer carried on the fragile threads of her heart. The world felt emptier without him nearby, yet the mere thought of seeing him again sent a rush of anticipation coursing through her veins. She had learned to navigate the fine line between yearning and restraint, savoring every stolen moment, every fleeting glance, every brush of his hand against hers as if it were a treasure she could hold on to forever. The intensity of her emotions left her dizzy, caught between the desire to confess everything and the fear of shattering the delicate balance they had maintained for so long. In her mind, she traced every detail of him, from the gentle slope of his shoulders to the way his laughter seemed to echo in her chest long after he had gone. She remembered the warmth in his eyes when he spoke to her, the unspoken understanding that passed between them in moments that felt suspended in time. She loved him not just for the person he was, but for the solace he brought into her life, a refuge from the loneliness that often crept in when the world seemed too cold. Her love was a storm contained within a fragile teacup, beautiful and dangerous all at once, a secret she nurtured with both joy and sorrow. She found herself walking through crowded streets yet feeling as though she were alone, because her mind was filled with memories of him, the way his voice sounded in the quiet moments, the way his presence could make the world disappear around her. Every encounter was a paradox, a mixture of bliss and heartache, a reminder of the impossibility of what she felt. She loved him for who he was, but she also mourned the life they could never openly share, a life that existed only in her imagination, painted in colors brighter than reality would ever allow. And in the quiet of the night, when the world was still and the house was dark, she would let herself imagine holding him close, whispering the words she could never speak aloud, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat against her own. In those moments, her heart was a prisoner and a free bird at the same time, caught in a love that was as beautiful as it was forbidden, as intoxicating as it was impossible, a love she carried with her through every glance, every word, and every fleeting moment they were allowed to share.